We are right about at noon, so we will get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director for the Teaching and Learning Center. You are at our Professional Development Series. This series meets every Wednesday at noon. And this is our last meeting. This is our last meeting of the academic year, which is really sort of surreal. We've had, I think, one every Wednesday over the entire academic year, and they've been wonderful. And today is going to be no different than all of the wonderful ones that we've had before. It'll be differently wonderful. Just to put a couple of announcements for you, if you're looking to earn a professional development certificate, my colleagues will drop the link to that in the chat. The information for that is available at that link. We have both professional development certificates for graduate students as well as for faculty and staff. If you are a faculty or a staff member who wants to be a Teaching and Learning Center fellow, we also have the opportunity for you to do that. So you can check out that link for the requirements for those. I'll also remind you that all of our sessions are recorded and are available for you to watch at your leisure asynchronously, and those are accessible through the TLC website. The only other announcement I want to make is that our first annual Teaching and Learning Center showcase on the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is this coming Monday, May 9th, the finals week, in room 181 in Hale Library, starting at 1:30. We will begin by a welcome from Tanya Gonzalez. Then Jason Bergtel, this year's Kaufman Chair for University Distinguished Teaching Scholars, will provide about a 20-minute keynote. We'll then have a number of oral presentations and then a poster presentation session for a lot of people over campus to share what they are doing to increase the scholarship of teaching and learning here at K-State. And we have refreshments, and I've been assured that they are going to be awesome. So if you're hoping to be there, that would be awesome. I would love to see you there on Monday afternoon. So those are my announcements. We'll redo those announcements at the end to make sure that everybody is up to speed on those. But without further ado, I would like to give the reins over to LaBarbara Wigfall, who has been one of the biggest champions for our professional development series over the last couple of years. And we're very grateful that LB and her team will be managing our PD series today.
Thank you all. And I'm going to turn it right over to my host.
All right, good afternoon. And I want to say welcome back to all of our special guests and educators. This is the TLC Talk Show. So I thank you for enjoying that brief commercial break. But now I want to introduce our special guest, again, Dr. LaBarbara Wigfall. And she has on her panel today, Dr. Rishi, as well as Richard Thompson. And they're going to share with us what it means to be a teacher. Dr. Wigfall?
Thank you so much. And I want to start by saying we're very excited to be here. It's been a long haul. You will hear from people who have almost 40 years, 45 years of teaching, one who has 4 years of teaching at K-State and years before, and one who has a special situation, having done work in our Fab Lab and now doing his first year of teaching in a classroom. So a variety of experiences that we're going to share. And I'm going to start this off by saying, how do we learn to teach, guys? Let's talk about it. And you're a part of or listening into a conversation that we're going to have. So just pay attention, relax, sit back and enjoy. So how'd you learn to teach?
Well, I can jump in. I'm not going to say I've learned to teach yet, but I think one thing I've observed kind of over this first year of teaching full time, I kind of sprinkled in some instructing on the side of my past jobs managing the shop, but it kind of takes the same philosophy as how we teach making in the fabrication lab, and that's you learn the most by actually doing it, which sounds kind of oversimplified, but the nuance, I think, to many of those things, there's only so much you can get advice for, and even, getting a syllabus from a former instructor only helps so much, because I think the nuance of actually going through it and doing it is really the best way to learn. So yeah, that's my simple answer.
Okay. And I will say in between them that teaching is not the same as learning the subject. And research shows that we all come from expertise, but no one teaches us how to teach that subject. And just because we learn it well and are very good students doesn't mean that we are able to transfer it to someone else in a meaningful way. So the roles can sometimes be reversed as teachers being learners themselves, as opposed to teaching others to learn. So, Sush, what do you have to say about that?
I mean, I think for me, I didn't think I was going to become a professor. I come from a family of teachers and professors. And so I was very sure it was something I didn't want to do. But the first time I actually taught a class was as a graduate teaching assistant while doing my master's. And I just discovered that it was something I really enjoyed. And I actually enjoyed it more than I ever thought I would. And so I think I learned a lot of teaching techniques and how I teach and what is, good teaching and how you teach in different circumstances from observing professors that I had that, I thought were good teachers. Also things that I didn't like that they did. I made sure that I I would make notes and be like, don't do that, don't say that, things like that. But I think that when I was a PhD student at the University of Washington, there was a course on teaching that all graduate students were required to take that I took. But one of the things I discovered was that you can only be taught so much about teaching. I mean, there's all of this pedagogy about how you do this, why you should do it, and how you do it in the classroom. But so much of whether you're able to use those techniques and whether they're successful is also about your own embodied experience and who you are and who students see you as. And I think for me, that has been the biggest learning experience. Just sort of as I have changed as a person, how my teaching has changed along with it.
I know for me, I like you, didn't start out thinking I was teaching. I had a degree, in a professional degree, where one expected me to work in an office and produce architecture. And I knew I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know where I was going with it. And I got an opportunity to teach medical students in a college of medicine, which is like, whoa, how do you even begin to do that? I'm not a medical student, but what I was asked to do, I thought was very unique, as an opportunity to share with them how they should think about acquiring property for their own offices. And at the same time, my own alma mater right up the street said, oh, since you're on campus teaching, we can pull you into teaching architecture. And that was sort of how I got involved in teaching. And the first couple of years were pretty tough. I mean, I remember having students who were pretty rough on me in their evaluation. And I was like, oh, if this is what teaching is, I don't know if I want to do it. But over the years, I've learned a lot. And we are going to talk about that generational learning that one learns from younger faculty as much as you learn from seasoned faculty. And you have to be kind of open to learning that way, because everyone has an experience that could be shared with you, and being not just seeing that you're the person who knows everything because you've been teaching for 30 years. Times change, students change, all of that. So there's a whole lot we're going to unpack here. So is there any special interaction with your colleagues that have helped you, guided you, provided feedback that helped you be a better teacher? That's one of my questions. And how did you learn from stepping in the muck? Because we all make mistakes, and then we got to figure out, oh, how do we get that off of us, and that perception that happens because you made a mistake. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of that learning from stepping in the muck is just understanding that you're gonna get dirty, and not everything's gonna be super clean the first time around. So I'm going to keep tying this back to the shop, because that's where most of my experience is. And we really try to drive home the idea of iteration and prototyping as part of that kind of design process, because like I was saying earlier, there's only so much you can figure out, on paper and in the computer. And it's the nuance of of actually applying it, the order in which you do it, the technique in which you apply, all kind of plays a big role in it. So I think it's just going into it, it's helped me, instead of like trying to get it perfect and stress about getting it perfect the first time, is like looking at it as a prototype, looking at it as kind of just an iteration along the way in the pursuit of kind of perfecting your course. So yeah, that's what's helped me just not freak out so much when I'm, planning a course that I didn't really have any guidance on, because it was a new course. So
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about that as well, with that you had a colleague that you started to collaborate with, and
yeah. So
connection.
I don't have a formal like mentor, because especially because I'm not tenure track, I'm just a full-time instructor. But when I was teaching, when I first started, and there's a new faculty, we kind of looked at a new program for the furniture design sequence in particular, and through that relationship, found we work well together, and that's really given me someone to kind of bounce ideas off of in regards to my other courses, or just really just anything in general. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah. And Susha, how do you answer that? What are you thinking about mentors or people in the department, or people that you experienced before coming to K-State that were your mentors?
I think that one of the things that I struggle with the most, and I struggled a lot with when I started teaching 8 years ago, is who are you actually teaching? Because the students that you have in your class, they're not all the same. They're all different. They have different learning styles, but they also have different levels of investment in the class, right? And so I have a tendency to fixate on the students who are not invested. And so I remember a conversation with my PhD advisor, who I was TAing for at the time, about a particular student, and he said to me, because I was saying, when I don't understand how students can do this. Like when I was a student, and as a student now, this is how I am a student, right? This is this is how you behave and things like that. And he said to me that one of the biggest things that you have to learn is that you're not teaching yourself. Like you have to move away from this idea that this is the kind of student I was, and this is the way to be a student. And so it took me a while to let go of that. That's a little bit hard, because it's, that's your experience. It's hard to kind of say, I'm gonna let go of this completely and teach whatever. I think that, and then the other thing that he said to me is like, you're teaching for all of them, but you're particularly teaching for those students that want to be taught and are invested. And you have to pay attention to them. And if you keep paying attention to the ones who are not, then you're not going to be able to teach. It is definitely something that I continue to struggle with. I tend to go to my colleagues quite a bit if I'm struggling with something with teaching, or if I'm getting annoyed at something that students are doing. I will go, like I come to ULB, I have a mentor that I go to, but I also just go to my colleagues, because different people have different styles, and I'll share my struggles and ask them how they would deal with it.
Sure.
That helps me. I come from India, so my undergrad is from India, and that's a very different education system.
Mhm.
And the way you behave, the way you grade is very, very different. So for me, that has been part of the struggle, because learning I've been here 15 years, but it's still it is a learning thing that I continue to learn every day.
Sure, I agree. And for you all, different from me, I didn't have a lot of mentors in the building. I came 30 years ago, and I thought from the people who interviewed me that they would be my mentors. And in a way they were, but as they left, they matriculated away, I was kind of stuck trying to figure out, like, who do I talk to? And that sort of gets to, and we're going to talk about this, sort of the social interactions that you have in your departments, and how that leads you to professional associations and so forth. But for me, it was really difficult because sometimes I would get kind of a block. It's like stepping in the muck. I'm thinking this is a good person to help me with it, but the politics and the socialization that comes with education and academy can sometimes like stop you dead in your tracks, and you're going, oops, that wasn't somebody I should have talked with, or they led me astray, or maybe that was the way they teach, but not the way I teach. So, finding that right connection with someone who is really tuned into you, interested in you to help you move forward is important. And I think let's get to something that you said about being a faculty member, an international faculty member who had a different family structure, and the experience that we both said happens. And that's the one that people told me later in my career. You got to toot your own horn. You have to be willing to advertise your own stuff. And that's really difficult. Culturally, it's difficult because both of us were talking about how we're taught to be humble. We're not taught to brag. We think of that as bragging. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then I'm going to share as well.
I think that so in most Asian cultures, particularly like in Indian culture, humility is valued above everything else. And so no matter how well you're doing or what your achievement is, you wait for other people to talk about it. You don't usually bring it up yourself. But I think that that's very different from the US, in particular academia here, because you kind of have to talk about what you're doing and what your achievements are, because otherwise people don't know. And not so much as like people should know how good you are, but I think that it helps you learn from other people, and at the same time also helps you find collaborators. So if you're not talking about what you're doing, then how will people know what you're doing, right? But that's something that I can't kind of, I feel like I still haven't found that balance, that line where, this is how much you talk about yourself and your achievements. And then, beyond this, it becomes too much, because my line is like way on the other side. And I constantly feel like even when something good happens, I usually just feel like that's not a big deal. And I think that some of that also for me comes from this idea that I don't think that I've been trained, and I believe that there is no new knowledge, and that there's nothing that you do individually. It's a collective effort. If you're writing something, you're building on the work of others, you're bringing something to it, but you're building on the work of others. And so I think I also struggle with talking about my work in terms of my achievements because of that, because I feel like, well, it doesn't just belong to me.
Yeah.
And I can get in the way.
Oh, and we talked about those also. That mentality also sets up missed opportunities, because when people don't know what you've been doing, how can you make those connections you're talking about that allow you to be in research projects or doing other things? And I know for me, for a long time, I wasn't really encouraged to say what I was doing in the college, or maybe I wasn't doing enough in the college. And it's only been recently, with some of the awards that I've gotten, grants I've gotten, that I've sort of realized in the late part of my career, I need to still talk about it. It may feel uncomfortable and kind of bragging, but that's the way that I get other people to acknowledge and support my own work, by saying something. And I've noticed, because of that, faculty who never sort of talked to me before and now like emailing me and catching me in the hall and stopping into my studio. All of a sudden, I feel like a celebrity, but it's taken it's taken me sort of breaking through that as well to get to this point where I thought this could have been happening all along, you know, but it wasn't, because I was sort of shy about bragging in my mind. And it's a thing that in some cultures takes a little bit of push to, you know, some mentor or someone to sort of help you get out there and put your stuff out there. And it's not that you're not writing, you know, that's one way that you can get things published and so forth. It's not that you're not doing community service work that gets your stuff out there. It's a different kind of sharing with your colleagues and others across campus that that I am, and I'm going to plug this right now, that one of our colleagues right now in the Teaching and Learning Center is really about acknowledging new up and coming faculty and trying to expose them to the rest of the university. And I think that's one of the ways that can happen. But if you're not connected there, how do you in your own college understand why certain people get their stuff in today or get their stuff out in press releases and other people don't? And that seems to be a really important component in terms of knowledge, also in terms of promotion. If you think about it, when you're coming up for tenure, do people know what you've been doing? Do they understand what you're about? And you can put it in your package for review, but it still doesn't feel like you've done enough to make that work. And so it's missed opportunities at the same time. And we've talked a little bit about humility. So I'm going to shift gears on the mystery of tenure. And both of these faculty members are not in a tenure track. And so, are not in tenure yet, but one is in tenure track, the other one isn't. Sorry, Sush. But I do want to speak to that as someone who's a senior member, because you know, the whole academia and the academy is sensitive about what people say or do or act or contact people. There's these mores that we have that new faculty have to learn. And this is where the step in muck comes from, that there are times when you think, oh, I have this great relationship with the president of the university, but you can get smacked down for not taking that through channels. I mean, something as simple as that. And so as a long-term tenured faculty member who's sort of at the end of her career, it's interesting to me that I'm constantly learning the rules of academia, that there were barren years and then there were productive years, and understanding that swing up and down in your career is also important in terms of fortitude, because it's so easy to become discouraged from the commitment that you made, what you perceived, what teaching was about. I mean, we all have to balance all the committee meetings that we didn't know we were going to have to do. We were thinking it was all about teaching and go prep, and had no idea how long prep takes. And who enjoys grading? I mean, it's all that stuff that you do that makes up what we do. But the myth is how you navigate through those gateways, and who is it that's supporting that? And sometimes you just don't know who is supporting you. And you can find yourself in a desert, truly. And so it's really important, and this is out to you all in the audience, to make sure that you are, and you're going to hear this from me more than once, that you really think over this summer about the folks above you and the folks below you that are your colleagues. And how can you engage in collegiality? How can you help both the bottom end of your spectrum and learn from the top end? Because there are a lot of tenured faculty who sort of sit on their laurels and think, well, you get it because I've already gotten it. This is the way I got it. And you have to go tough it and figure it out, rather than someone mentoring you. And that's important too, is that that spectrum of colleagues should be about collegiality, and we should be helping each other be better, because by doing so, we are a better institution. And so that's something that I really want our faculty to think about, is how do we up and down the spectrum be good mentors, be good examples. I remember my department head saying something to me, because we don't realize that other new faculty are watching us. And the way we behave might be okay for us, but the other faculty member who's watching you may not understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it. So we are all good examples for each other, and we're also bad examples for each other. So it's really important to be thinking about how we help our non-tenured faculty move into tenure with good advice that we give them, but also listen to them, because they come in with creative ideas. They have a new perception of us that we can't see because we've been there a while. And they bring new ideas that I think are worthy of consideration. So I just want to throw that out to you. So who had a formal mentor? Did you have a formal mentor, Sush? You had a formal mentor. Did you, Richard? Do you have a formal mentor?
No, not really.
Okay, so I want to clear that up, that mentoring can be important to all of us. I mean, I had to go find a mentor because no one gave me one. I guess they assumed if you taught for 9 years, you ought to know the academy. But when you move from university to another university, the rules aren't always the same. And so, as Sue said, you know, she was at a university where she was acting in a certain role and the rules were different, and she has to be observant of what's happening at K-State and how we do things. And so there isn't a catch-all, be-all bag that you just pick up and give to another person and say, hey, here's it. But those are important things. So I want to switch to how do you bridge the gap in later years? And I've started to talk about that a little bit, how I bridge the gap, because there were dormant years and then there were productive years. And it doesn't feel good when you don't get a lot of kudos, or you feel like, oh, you need to go to the teaching and learning center because you're thinking you're a good teacher, you've been teaching for a long time, you know how to teach, but then you're asked to go get help with your teaching and what that can feel like to go get help. But it is also important that you realize that the person who might be asking you to do that is really in your best interest, that they're really trying to help you make your journey up the rung to full professorship or wherever you're trying to get to as your next level. And in doing so, the embracing that you find can also be a validation of what good you're really doing in your particular field. And so for me, it was a very, it was a sobering thing to hear, but it also turned out to be one of the best things that could happen, because I also got a lot of validation for the things I was doing really, really well. And that's why I feel like our weekly chats are so important to have, because you might not get all the support you want in your college or your department, but you can get that validation at the university level if you find the right folks that really get you, that really understand you, and say, oh, no, that's a good idea. I think I want to use that in my class. Those are good validations that help you, no matter what year or what person up or down the spectrum in tenure tell you that. Whether you hear it from a new faculty member or you hear it from a seasoned faculty member, it's a healthy collegial way to work together to make us all better. So I want to go to something else really quickly. I think at some point in our careers, you get to a point where you're trying to make a decision about whether you commit or whether you drop out. I'm sure we've had days when we're kind of going, oh, like, is this really what teaching is? So Sush talked a little bit about that, and I'm not going to put her totally on the spot, but kind of tell us the variables that you use to make decisions about the good days and the bad days. How do you do that? How do you balance that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how I balance it. I just know that I think that as a junior faculty member, and somebody who, I was on the job market for 3 years before I got this job. And so I applied to about 120 jobs before I got this one. And I have multiple friends who were in a PhD program with me and did not get a job in academia. Some of them have adjunct positions and have had adjunct positions for 5 to 6 years. A lot of them dropped out and are doing other things. And I think that, so when I did get this job, because so many other people haven't gotten the job, I felt like there was not a lot of space for me to be able to say, here are the things that are really difficult, or here are the things that I don't like about this, or I wish were different. But I also think that the university and academia has changed so much and is changing so rapidly that in some ways every year there is more stuff that faculty are supposed to do. And it's not that I don't feel valued, but I feel like I certainly have days where, even as somebody who changed careers to become a professor and spent like 8 years getting here, I still have lots of days where I don't know if I'm gonna stick it out even after I get tenure. And a lot of that is about, I don't think we hear a lot of good stuff. I mean, I think that part of it is that, there's not a lot of good news. There's not a lot of things that you hear that you could feel. I feel like we hear a lot of like the budgets and the dropping student numbers and the, lawsuits and the, things like that, and then a lot of other things that that make at least me question my place here. I love my job most days, but I still don't know if, I mean, part of it is that tenure is going away in other places. And so I always say that I think in my lifetime, maybe next 10, 15 years, tenure is probably going to go away. And if that is the case, then I don't know if I should be working at 1/3 of what I could make.
Yeah.
I think what kind of helps me with that, I mean, not being tenure track, but obviously we do hear a lot of negative things, and that's to kind of just, you can listen to that stuff, but also just put the blinders on and look forward at what you're doing. And I think some of that, what's come up a couple times is like where you need to talk about yourself to get good press and all that. But I think that, just like my idea for mentorship, kind of all comes together is, I don't have a formal mentor, but I feel like I'm still mentoring. And that's just through the kind of informal interactions with, faculty that I've collaborated with, popping into the department head's office, shooting an idea by them, and getting these little bits of encouragement. I think it helped me a lot, especially on those days that I'm like, what am I doing? Why did you hire me to do this? Like, or you start to like just second guess, that imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of younger, well, probably everyone just kind of, that's the perception, is like younger, newer faculty, that imposter syndrome is real. Like you feel like you don't belong, but you obviously, people value you. So I think that helps me, those little bits of informal interaction that can kind of build you up. It also is a way to get what you're doing out there. Is like, if you're not as comfortable talking about yourself to a big audience and to really just send it all out there, it's kind of like sprinkling that out, talking to people and passing, kind of getting them up to speed on what you're doing. And then that's, you get their interest feedback, and they either understand what you're doing and are interested, and that spurs more conversations, or they're like, oh, interesting, and then okay, that's someone that maybe doesn't see what I'm doing, or the value of it, and move on, put the blinders on, and focus on who does value your work, and kind of build those relationships. So.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things that I would have said, and I want us to be moving into our breakout rooms, is that, as faculty, whether we're seasoned faculty or new faculty in the academic culture, that it really is about perception. What the things that we are talking about are about perception, what we think we're seeing, what we think people are doing and responding to us, as well as what our real experiences are. And in this academy that we work within, there is real complexity, if you think about it, in terms of how we balance all the things that we're asked to do that we didn't know we signed up for, but have to do. And that work experience has been challenged a lot by COVID, having to learn new systems to communicate, doing hybrids, and not just COVID, but over the career, there's so many new things, as Richard talked about, it changes so frequently. I mean, I used to get upset when every year the university changed its communication techniques. I'm like, good night. You mean I got to learn another software? Good. It's like, change it every year. I'm just starting to figure out the one I'm in. And those are things that we do because we love what we do. We love to see our students flourish and to see our colleagues flourish, which is part of why we're having this conversation. So I would like Hayden to put us into groups, and let me tell you what the groups are going to do a little bit so you'll know that we want you to talk about how you support faculty, how you are collegial suggestions on how you can learn from both seasoned faculty as well as younger faculty, how you're going to do that next fall and beyond, and just talk about the kind of support that you're getting or giving. And we're just going to take notes for different strategies that you provide in your conversation. Please choose one person to do your report out. There will be 3 breakout rooms, and we look forward to seeing you in a moment. You got 10 minutes. I just sat in the chat some links that you might be interested in. So I wanted to make sure we were all here before I did that. So let's see what our report out was like between the 3 groups.
Well, I can start. I think we had an overwhelming agreement that really seeking out or taking advantage of those kind of informal opportunities for feedback and discussion was the most helpful. And just because of the kind of comfort level, it's easier to kind of be vulnerable and pitch ideas, and you're more receptive of feedback on kind of that intimate level instead of having to like set a meeting and pitch ideas to a group or whatnot. So I think that, we were all young faculty and kind of agreed that those were the times when it was kind of easiest to collaborate and coordinate ideas.
Okay. Second group.
I can go for our group. One of the things that we consistently talked about was when you're first starting to teach, you often replicate what's familiar and what you saw as a student. And not a lot of us are formally taught how to teach. So we may default to some of the things that we saw when we were students ourselves, but it can be hard to break those habits. So one of the things that we talked about was reflecting on what you're doing and why, and communicating that to your students. Another thing is that you may have had great mentors to help you learn how to teach, but if you're not them, you just kind of need to figure out your own strengths and play those up. So you can be your authentic self when you're teaching.
Okay, good. And who was in Susha's group?
I was in Susha's group along with Tiffany and Trina, and similar to the first group, we talked a lot about feedback, both formal and informal forms of feedback. That we don't often get that a lot as teachers. In like the Principles of College Teaching course, that's a fundamental part of the class in which students go and observe different teachers and able to learn through that way. But outside of that, we don't often get a lot of the feedback. A lot of times there isn't time to do those sorts of things, and time, as we all know, is a valuable resource. So that's something we talked a lot about. Something that I have also thought about is normalizing failure a little bit. I'm very lucky to work with an advisor who is very open about failure, and that great teachers didn't just get there. You know, there was a process of learning, and in academia, we have a lot of failure, whether it's manuscript rejection or whether a class didn't go as well as we wanted it to. But the best part is we get do-overs. And so I think sharing those, normalizing those experiences can really help combat and mitigate those feelings of the imposter phenomenon that a lot of less experienced instructors might feel.
Yeah, I saw that Don put in the chat about as advisors, they fail a lot. And we have to realize that too. I mean, as advisors ourselves, that we also have to tell people how we failed in order for them to hopefully not step in that. But for them, that particular strategy might work for them. So it's important to share both sides of that spectrum. I want to wrap up.
Sorry, Abby, can I add one thing that we talked
Yeah.
about? One of the things that I think stood out to me in our conversation was also that, and Tiffany brought this up and I seconded it, is that, you know, I think that when we were talking about how do we learn from each other, that the brown bags and the meetings and all of this is a great way to learn from each other. But like maybe something like a peer review, not an evaluation, like somebody coming and sitting in your class and giving you feedback on your teaching would be something that could be useful, right? Like other than students having somebody, I know that PLC used to have that. I don't know if they still do, but that would be something that we could probably benefit from. Instead, I mean, because we do the T-vals, right? We have all of that and we know the shortcomings and the benefits of those, but perhaps like in terms of teaching style and how we teach and stuff, that it could be useful to have something like peer reviews and things.
Sure. Anyone else want to share? I'm going to wrap up our.
I was going to respond to that real briefly. So the TLC did used to have the peer review of college teaching. It kind of didn't survive our enrollment crisis in terms of the budget we had for it. However, we are looking to do something a little bit more informal in the fall, and hopefully we'll have some future details for you that at the beginning of the fall semester. So we absolutely agree with the sentiment that's being raised, and we hope to have something for you in the fall.
Great. And that seems like a great segue for me. And to wrap up this TLC talk, our experience and research indicates that the trajectory towards tenure and promotion is complex and arduous, and it requires one to balance attention among many diverse and competing demands. And that's true whether we're moving to tenure or we're moving to promotion or we're looking for a distinguished professorship. All of those things fit. Research shows that faculty perception and experience determine the path towards fortitude versus burnout. Who we are willing to receive advice, how we learn lessons as faculty, and we support each other is paramount to how others perceive our collegiality and our strategic balance between these diverse and competing demands. Ultimately determines our professional and personal fortitude as teachers. So I just wanted to end with that, and I think our host is going to clear us out.
So thank you so much for
thank you guys for tuning in into the TLC show. We want to thank our special guests and educators of sharing this information of authentic professional experiences on how, you know, to challenge the parts of how do we teach. So we want to thank you. And again, this is the TLC Talk Show, and I'm your honored host, Mitzi Farmer.
So I'll end with the commercial break. First of all, thank you, LB, and the rest of the panel for having an amazingly, this was a real talk session, and I really appreciate that. I think this is a place where we can be honest with each other, and I really appreciate that authenticity. This was also our last professional development event of the academic year. Please do the post-event surveys. These really help us kind of figure out what people are wanting in our professional development series. If you're looking to earn a professional development certificate, my colleagues, again, are going to drop that link into the chat. They're also going to let that same link will take you where if you want to pursue fellowship status at the TLC Center, you can have that there too. And then finally, on Monday, this coming Monday at 1:30 in Hale 181, we have our first annual TLC Soto Showcase, and we really hope that we will see you there. So in short, thank you so much for your participation both today and this entire academic year. And thank you for supporting excellence in teaching and learning here at K-State. Bye, y'all.